In this video, we'll learn the simplest form of line and wash, in which we use a water-soluble line and water on our brush to pull out some of the color and suggest form. You'll need a pen with water-soluble ink. Most office-type gel pens do have water-soluble ink. You can check by making a line on a piece of watercolor paper and then using a wet brush to see if some of the ink will move. It's worth trying several different pens to see which one you like best. Even though these two pens are both black ink, the second black is a slightly warmer black and moves a little bit more. This is a third pen, a cartridge pen. It has yet another color of black ink. So play around and see which pen you like best. Line and wash is often used as a sketching medium, so I'm going to work in my sketchbook. First, I'm going to try the same three pens and see which one I like on my sketchbook paper. Now we need something to sketch. I'm going to use these little plastic pears. You want to choose something with a very simple shape for this initial exercise so that you can learn the technique without worrying too much about the drawing itself. Now we're ready to begin our drawing. Please don't be concerned if your drawing skills aren't all that great yet. This is a great way to practice your drawing, and it turns out that for line and wash, often having kind of a wandering, wonky line works out really well. Especially for this form of line and wash, it's good to have plenty of places where you've restated the line, because that will give you more ink to move when it's time to create your shading. We're working in ink, so of course you can't erase, but don't be concerned about that because stray lines will be softened when we add the water. Now I'm going to take a wet brush, and using just the tip of the brush, I'm dragging some of the color down from the drawing to create the suggestion of a shadow underneath my pears. And then I'm going to also suggest a little bit of the shadow side of the pear by pulling some of the color into the interior of the pears. Isn't that charming? Little sketches like this make a great addition to a postcard or a travel journal, and they don't take very long at all, so they're perfect for traveling or sketching on the go. Of course, part of why this works so well is that we chose a really simple subject. In a later video, we'll talk about some strategies you can use when you're sketching on location to choose a simple, manageable subject. There's one very common problem I want to mention to you, and so hopefully you'll be able to avoid it. But I want to also tell you this is almost universal. Almost everyone does this at least some of the time. So you draw your little drawing. I'm just going to do one pear to explain this. And you get your little wonky drawing done, and then you take your brush, and it's very, very common for people to start in one place on the edge and just kind of go around the whole edge, sort of blending out that line. And then what you really have is just a fat outline. So make sure that some of your strokes go into the interior of the object to pull some of that ink in to create shading, and some of it go to the exterior to create shading, instead of just going around the outline. But also be kind to yourself when you do it, because almost everyone does. So you're just joining the club if it happens to you. I love the simplicity and portability of this. All you need is an inexpensive black pen, your sketchbook or some postcards, and a brush and a little container of water or one of those water brushes that you can fill with water, and you're all set to sketch. But you can do the same technique with other types of water-soluble tools, such as a watercolor pencil or watercolor markers. Watercolor pencils have a couple of quirks that I want to share with you so that you won't be surprised if you try this with watercolor pencils. So let me just quickly demonstrate this again. So I'm going to use a blue pencil mostly so that you can see what I'm doing a little better. And again, I'm going to just roughly sketch out my drawing just like I did with the pen. Okay, so now that we have our drawing done, we'll use our wet brush again, and as you can see, it's sort of a surprise to see what color this pencil actually is when you get it wet. It's not uncommon for watercolor pencils to look quite a bit different dry than they do wet. Instead of a almost blue-black line, this is actually a fairly bright blue. So it's worth testing your pencils ahead of time to see what color you're really going to get. Now at this point, somebody always asks, well, why don't you just use the colors that are actually in the pairs? So let's go back and do that. I'm going to pull out some watercolor pencils that at least look like they're sort of the closest colors to what I have in my pairs. So we begin by sketching the outline of our pairs as before. And once we have that done, let's add some shading. And this is sort of a yellow green or greeny yellow. That's sort of the color of the pairs that I have. So I'm being really rough and loose here, just trying to get some color down, imagining that this is like I'm sketching on location and I don't have very much time. And maybe we'll throw in a little bit of this red tone, this little pinkish blush on the pairs. Loose and sketchy. Okay, so now let's get a brush and oh my, that's kind of a surprise. That's even more of a surprise than the blue. So this is one of the things to know about watercolor pencils. It's really hard to judge when you're shading by hand. Is that the right color? Maybe I should have used a different color. Let's try some of this other green. We'll try to put that in there, but that doesn't really look like the right color either. And something else that's happening when I tried to add that green, I'm going to show you off a little bit on the side so you can see it happening. If I put some watercolor pencil down and then I use a wet brush to move the color, or if I have an already wet area and then I try to draw into that wet area and then try to move the color, you'll see that it doesn't like to move anywhere near as well if the area is already wet. That wet line sinks right down into the paper. So what are we going to do about this? Well, here is the magic solution. This is a piece of frosted plastic. This is a piece of quilt template plastic. Sometimes you can find report covers that are this type of thing. Sometimes you'll find packaging material, but anything that's stiff enough and has a frosted textured surface will work. So let's start again, draw our little pairs. Okay, so now we have our outline, and now I'm ready to add color, and this time what I'm going to do is take my pencil and scribble on the plastic, and because it's frosted, some of the color comes off and is deposited there, and then I can just use a brush to dissolve that, and it basically acts like any other kind of watercolor at this point. So I can blend colors and mix them on my little piece of plastic palette until I get a color that's more like what I wanted. Now because this is line and wash, I'm going to use this color that I've gotten off my palette, sort of like I used the water in the previous method with the black ink. I'm not going to try to color it in like a coloring book. I'm just going to give a little suggestion of color, and we'll say more about that in the next video. And if I decide I want to add a little red and I'm out of room, all I have to do is take a cloth or a paper towel and just wipe a little area clear, and now I have a fresh place to mix a different color. So if you take a little piece of plastic like this and tuck it in with your set of watercolor pencils and get a little water brush or a small travel brush and a small container for water and a cloth and your sketchbook or postcards, and you really have everything you need to travel and do small postcard size watercolors. So it's a nice, neat, portable method of doing watercolors on location. And I'm just going to finish up here by creating a little bit of a suggestion of a shadow. So we ground these pairs, give them something to sit on. So I just dropped in a mixture of all my colors, and now I'm going to soften the edges and just give a little suggestion of a surface for those pairs. So there are 3 quick and easy ways that you can use a very simple version of line and wash to do some sketching on location with black ink and water or with colored pencil or colored marker and water, or even with multiple colors of watercolor pencils using your little piece of plastic to allow you to blend them more easily. Or that same trick also works with watercolor markers. All of these techniques rely on a water-soluble line, but in the next video, we'll look at the more traditional form of line and wash, in which the line is made with a waterproof pen so that the line does not move as we add regular watercolors to give our splashes of color.